All right, my friends. We are now going to look at a data set in raw form. Raw meaning that it's just data given to you in a spreadsheet. I'm going to have y'all create the spreadsheet or the scatter plot, excuse me, the scatter plot for the data. And then I'm going to ask you if you think there's a correlation between the variables. I've called this set the mystery data set. Mystery data. To access it, I'm going to exit out of the PowerPoint here. You want to go to day 2 for correlation and data mining. Okay, and then wander on down to the mystery data spreadsheet, depending on which class you're in. They're both the same, so it doesn't matter. So I'm going to crack her open. It's an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, and what you're looking at, I haven't even told you what the independent and dependent variables are because I'm mean. But the independent variables are in the B column and the dependent variables are in the C column. So what we're going to do is I'm going to select all that data. Okay, and then I'm going to insert, I scroll back up to the top there, I'm going to insert a scatter plot of that data. If you scroll up, that way you don't have to scooch your chart to the top like I did before. And I'm even going to delete the chart title because honestly, you know nothing about this data whatsoever. I don't want the context of the data to in any way impact how you interact with it. I want you to look at this data and you hit pause in a second here and tell me, do you think there is a correlation between the horizontal variable, the independent, the run, and the dependent, the rise? Okay, now using the same kind of approach that we looked at before, I tend, when I'm looking at correlations, just my approach to data mining, I look for blank spaces like this one. Like I noticed something. I noticed there are a whole heck of a lot of points that are clustered right around here. And I also noticed that when these numbers are smaller, these points are much, much more varied, top to bottom. As these numbers get bigger out here, there's less variation. So I'm not so much sure that there's maybe a trend upward left to right, but there does definitely appear to be something interesting in the overall data set of more varied to less varied. But that's kind of a correlation. It's just not a direct positive or direct negative. I mean, you could argue that there definitely is a bit of a trend going upward. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't do this necessarily. But there's your trend line. I'm going to hover, not click. There's a trend line. And that trend line, if you look at it, is sloping upward. I think that's a bit of a heavy-handed way of approaching it. But there definitely does appear to be a bit of a relationship. As these numbers go up, these numbers get less variable. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to reveal for you what you're actually looking at. Okay, I'm going to change this axis title to being intentionally silent because I want you to process this as I'm typing it. And then let's add that title back in that I deleted. Chart title. So this is pretty, I just did this as a hunch one day. I was sitting in the office and trying to come up with data. And I said, you know, let's look for some kind of like goofy, meaningless correlations and see what I can come up with. So I took all the final grades. So these are actual final averages in Math 105. And this is length of student last name. Okay, so I went into my grade books and I figured out how long their last names were. Used Excel to count that, so I got some 5-letter last names, some 12, some 6, some 4, some 13, and so forth. And then I just I placed that length of the last name right alongside of what their actual final average was. And this is what you're looking at. So each of these little dots up here, each of these dots is a student's last name. That also explains, you might be wondering why there's gaps between, there's no 2s, but there are some 3s, and then it jumps to 4, and then it jumps to 5, and then it jumps to 6 and 7 and so forth. And that's because you can't have like 3.5 letters in your last name. So there's a reason that each of the rows of points is directly vertical. There's not as much of a cloud as there was in those previous ones. What I still find fun, though, is I can't explain this gap right here. So I can explain certain things, like more students, of course. More students have last names that are between, say, 5 and 8 letters long. Okay, if we actually arranged this data in order, which I'll show you how to do later in the class, you can tell by the dots there's more students over here than there are over here. But that doesn't explain the variability of the students. Like, that doesn't explain why the lower lettered last names are more spread out. I mean, you would maybe these are spread out too, and this is only, just FYI, this is only from academic year 2019 and 2020. So this is the one we're currently in the middle of. I haven't added y'all in here yet because you don't have final grades. But it's interesting. And what's also interesting, I'm going to click on the graph and do our little limit the data set thing that we did before. And I'm going to back it up. I want to back up about halfway. I have about the same number of students every term. I don't exactly know. So I started at about 180. I'll go back to about 100. And this would take out roughly last terms and only look at fall. And this is just, so this would literally just be looking at my fall classes. It's almost the exact same shape. And if I undo it, you see that? So I can't explain why this gap is here for 2 terms. It was there last fall and it was there in the winter. I don't know why. I don't know if it will continue. I look forward to continuing this to see if there's some weird correlation in folks that have longer last names than those that don't. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of a correlation between folks that have longer last names and their performance in Math 105. Maybe this will continue. I have no idea without looking at more data. All right, so this is kind of fun. It's an interesting little pseudo correlation. We'll look at some more stuff in the next video.